How is everyone? Today we're going to talk about linear perspective. Linear perspective is a mathematical way of drawing three-dimensional space on a flat plane. The first thing we want to do is recognize that our ruler has four sides. And then we're going to also recognize that our paper has four sides. The only way to make a perfect horizontal or vertical line is to line your ruler up with one of those four sides. So your ruler should be perfectly even with one of the sides of your paper. The edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper, so I know that my line is going to be nice and horizontal. It's very important that you check your measurements twice or you check your alignment twice to make sure that your ruler is lined up. You press down really hard on your ruler and you barely touch your pencil because you don't want your pencil to move the ruler out of the way. You want to make sure that you don't use your pencil and push the ruler out of the way. So you want to push down really hard on your ruler and barely touch your pencil. Going over your lines lightly more than once always helps. So now that we have a great horizontal line, that's step one, horizon line. So we're going to write down the steps as we go along. Step one is horizon line. Step two is the vanishing point. The vanishing point is where the diagonal lines go that we haven't talked about. The diagonal lines are going to be used to show size diminution, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But this is your vanishing point. Think of it as like a black hole. Any diagonal line that you make goes straight to that vanishing point. And already you realize that it's very important that you pay attention to your horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines. They're all very different and they're used for different things, especially when it comes to this. It's not just a straight line. We have to know the difference between horizontal, vertical, and straight lines. So we have a horizontal line for the top of our rectangle, and we have a vertical line for the side of our rectangle. Our rectangle has 4 points, but we're only going to pay attention to 3. This is step 3, shapes. Now we're going to connect the dots. Notice, remember when we said all of your diagonal lines go straight to that vanishing point. This is something that's very important, and you can't be close. It can't be near the vanishing point. Your ruler has to go through both points, so it's very important that you take your time. You check to make sure that your ruler is going through both points. So we're doing step 4 right now. Step 4 is size diminution lines. Size diminution lines show you how small things should get as they get farther away. Think of an airplane. You're getting on an airplane and you go higher and higher and higher. The higher you get, the smaller things on the ground appear. That's what your size diminution lines help you to figure out. How small should things get as they get farther away? So once again, this is step 4, size diminution lines. These are the only diagonal lines that will go to your vanishing point. When you want things to look realistic, when you want it to look like it's getting farther away, you use these size diminution lines to help you. Let's make some more shapes now. We're going back to step 3. Notice I'm not using my ruler. Some people have a hard time using their ruler to start off drawing the shapes. Other people find it easier to just go ahead and draw a sloppy shape and then go back and clean it up with their ruler. It helps you figure out where you want your shapes to go. So the edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper. I make my horizontal line. The edge of my ruler is even with the bottom of my paper. So I go ahead and make my perfect vertical line. The edge of my ruler is even with the side of my paper, so I go ahead and make my perfect horizontal line. And here I'm going to make my last vertical line. When you're doing this, you want to talk to yourself, especially when you're first starting. Step 3 is shapes, but you want to talk to yourself when you're using your ruler to line things up. You always want to make sure that the edge of your ruler is even with the edge of your paper. In class, when we have class, I grade you based on how you use your ruler. So once again, we want to line this up perfectly. You don't want these two dots to be near each other. You want to be close. You want to perfectly align with your ruler. So you check your measurement twice. And once again, you barely press down on your pencil because you don't want your pencil to push your ruler out of the way. You press down nice and hard on your ruler, and you make sure that your line, your rulers are going through each other. Now we're going to go ahead and finish up and clean up this rectangle that we put at the top of the paper. Edge of my ruler, even with the edge of my paper. Talk to yourself while you do this. Edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper. And once again, the edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper. And once again, we can connect the dots. You've noticed that we haven't been connecting all 4 points of our squares and rectangles. If we connected all 4 parts, what do you think would happen? Right. The building may look see-through. Your line might go through the building or the bridge or the skateboard ramp that you're making. So you want to make sure that you don't want it to look transparent unless you mean for it to look transparent or see-through. Maybe it's a glass building. Who knows? But it's always good to use your ruler to check to make sure that you can connect these points without it causing problems for you. Here it looks like the point might not connect, but it's good to try anyway to see what happens. And it might help the realism in your whole picture. So I'm going to connect these points, and it works. Notice that every way we put a rectangle or square is different from the rectangle or square we put before. So we always got to check to see how far we can push it, to see if we can finish these steps. So we have step 3 with shapes, and we have our step 4 with size and minutia. And what's size and minutia for again? The farther things get away, the smaller they appear. So you want to make sure that you use size and minutia lines as a guide to help you figure out how things are going to show on your paper. You can make your fantasy world look huge, gigantic. You can make it look like somebody's falling from the sky. You can make it look like your world goes on forever with train tracks or a speedy car collisions or anything you could possibly imagine, spaceships or anything you can imagine. Now, this is the hard part that people really have problems with. Let's say this is an office building. I'm lining the edge of my ruler up with the edge of my building to section off maybe these apartment buildings or these downtown office buildings. So once again, the edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper. This is the biggest test, because if you don't do this right, your building and your walls and your ceilings are going to look like they're slanted and falling and collapsing, and your fantasy world begins to fall apart. So you really want to use what you've learned, the edge of your ruler even with the edge of your paper. And here you're also using the size and minutia lines as a guide. You don't go through the size and minutia lines, because that's your guide. That's your ruler, right? That's your other ruler. That's your helper. And it's going to help me figure out how small these buildings should be as they get farther away. Notice, edge of my ruler, even with the edge of my paper. If you make a mistake and make a diagonal line, your whole fantasy world falls apart here. And notice how the cubes, the office buildings, the parts of the bridge start to look smaller as they get farther away, because I'm using those size and minutia lines. This could be a subway car. It could be a subway train. Now we're going to work on making windows. You're going to make the top and the bottom of your windows. We're going to use the size and minutia lines to help us figure out how small or how big our window should be. We're going to use the size and minutia lines to help us figure out how small or big our window should be. So we're going to make the top.
All right. So I'm going to make windows.
Right now.
I want my windows, the top of my window to be here. You have to decide where you want the top of your window to be.
We're going to make the top of our window connected to the vanishing point.
I'm going to make it stop at the end of my
Notice
building.
we didn't use the edge of our paper because we're making
top of my window. I'm going to make one more size and minutia line.
So that's the top of our window. Now we're going to make the bottom of our window. And this is the same way you make doors. This is the same way you make windows and skyscrapers.
It starts to
the
look
same
like
way
a
you make
subway train.
trees
You
or
can
mountains.
imagine what would
You make
happen
a
if
sides
you
and
wanted to make a
minutia line as
subway
a
train, a
guide to
truck,
help you figure
or a
out how
tractor
small it should
trailer.
be. One for the top
Now,
and one for the
the
bottom.
front of my building
So we
is
have our
a
sides and
vertical
minutia
line.
lines.
The
And now we
end of
know
my
how
building
small our
is
windows
also
are
a
going to
vertical
be
line. So that
as
means
we
the
begin
end
to
of my
make them.
windows or the
So
sides
one
of my
of the first
windows
things
are
that we
going to
can
be
do
vertical lines. The only way to make vertical and horizontal lines are to edge of my ruler
is
should be
to make the
perfectly
sides of our
even with the edge of my
windows.
paper.
So once again, these are vertical lines. Whatever happens in the front of your building should also
the edge
happen
of
in
my
the
first
back.
window. Edge of my ruler should be perfectly
Our
even
edge
with
of
the
our
edge of my
rulers
paper.
even with the edge of our
Let's see.
paper, so
End
we
of my
make our
window,
vertical
here's my
lines.
second.
You have to
Edge of my
recognize the
ruler,
difference
even with
between
the edge of my
vertical,
paper.
horizontal,
Edge of my
and
ruler,
diagonal
even with the edge
lines.
of
You have
paper.
to
Now
talk
watch
to
what's
yourself,
happening here. The
help
bottom
yourself figure
and the
out,
top of my
is
window
this
have
a
already
diagonal
been
line?
made
Is
by the
this
sides
a
of the minutia line.
vertical line? Is this a
So now
diagonal
I can
line?
go
Is
ahead
this a
and erase
horizontal line?
things
And you're constantly
that I
going back
don't
and forth to
need.
recognize what
I
type
can
of lines you're
continue
trying to
to
make.
make windows all the way down.
And I'm going to go ahead and keep making these
Edge of my
windows.
ruler,
Edge of my ruler is even with the edge of my paper. Talking to yourself,
edge of my ruler,
making
even with the edge
sure
of my paper.
that everything is lined
my
up so
ruler.
that this world is
Stay with
solid
me.
and believable, and
Make
that
sure
your
the
fantasy
edge,
doesn't begin to fall apart.
and I can continue to make my windows
And just
all the
just
way
for your ideas, we could still
throughout.
turn this
And
into
I'll
Thor's
sit
hammer.
here and
Maybe
let
it's
this play so
Megatron's
you can
arm.
watch.
Maybe it's a subway car. Maybe it's a train. Maybe
And
it's a
do it
roller
yourself.
coaster. Maybe
Feel
it's
free to
a
rewind
spaceship.
it
Maybe it's any number
and
of
see
things
how
that you can
yours is
possibly
similar
imagine.
or different from what I'm doing.
Edge of my ruler, even with the edge of my paper, my
And
windows
even
get
these middle
smaller and
windows
smaller
down here.
as they
Edge of
get
my
farther
ruler, even with the
and
edge of my
farther
paper.
away.
See, I started to move away from the edge of my paper, and it really would have started to mess me up a little bit. All right, so now I have windows that are slowly getting
Clean it up a little
farther
bit with the
and farther
eraser.
away.
And that's what the sides and minutia lines are for. The sides and minutia lines are meant to be erased. They're just guides. They're just there to help you.
All right, so that's
And
our
that's it.
first
I want you guys to go
two
ahead and practice this
videos.
on your own. Do these
You can
4
stop and
steps
start
plus
this video
windows.
whenever you
Can
want.
you add doors?
Wherever you want.
What happens if you put
Repeat
windows
it
and doors
as
at the
much
very
as-
front of your
as
shape?
much as you want. Explore, look at
Okay,
other
so
things,
explore,
look at different
look up
comics,
other
look at
artists,
different cartoons, see
and
how other artists
we'll
are
come back with
using
another video shortly.
linear perspective. Once you have these steps and you understand how sides and minutia works, there's really no end to the things that you can do. I'm gonna make a bottom of my mountains here. You see I'm still drawing because this is very fun. I have my mountains go up to the horizon line, or you can have them go past the horizon line. But for this, we're gonna have it go to the horizon line and stop there. Maybe have a couple to go past it. Notice how my mountains are overlapping. Overlapping is a simple way to create three-dimensional space or more space, one thing in front of another. Very simple ways of doing a few different things. Even if you wanted to have a mountain go past it, past the horizon line just a little bit. All right, have fun.